Oh man, this is big, and almost no one in the West is talking about it. The corporate corrupt media are ignoring it, of course. What China, Russia, and North Korea have done will change everything in the biggest way possible. Their trade and economic expansion has the West crapping its pants, which could push us into World War III. Now, many, myself included, believe we're already in World War III, but just wait until the real shooting starts, because that's honestly how Washington sees the world. Rather than spending trillions of dollars on our own infrastructure in the United States, building out our own Belt and Road Initiative with new railroads and infrastructure and shipping lanes and all of that, no, we'd rather enrich the military-industrial complex, give that money to weapons manufacturers like Raytheon and Northrop Grumman, enrich those people. Meanwhile, there's people sleeping on the streets of the United States.
The number of homeless people on the streets and in shelters across the U.S. increased significantly this year.
Roads and bridges are a total disaster. Crime is at an all-time high. So apparently America is fine. We'd rather enrich these defense contractors. Well, this week we just got our clearest sign yet that the West is getting desperate. And desperate people do very dangerous things. The United States Air Force Secretary General saying China is prepping for war against the United States. Imagine that. Why would China be preparing for war against the United States? And the warmongers on TV are saying that China is the real threat. We better prepare for war now.
He was making certain his troops understood that war could be around the corner. We have all said the very same thing, that China does have a military advantage right now. More ships, more planes, and certainly more missiles. That is where the general's coming from, because he knows that we're vulnerable and we have got to fix it.
Yeah, the trillions of dollars we spend on our military each year simply isn't enough. We need more weapons. And right on cue, NATO last week launched its biggest military exercises yet to show China and Russia that we mean business. The Pentagon announcing they're also clearing out jungles to build brand new military bases near China. Wait a second, where are the crying liberal environmentalists now? Clearing a forest to build yet another military base? If you're keeping score, the United States now has over 960 military bases around the world. And look how many are sitting in China's backyard. The United States, in this interview, says they're also clearing off older World War II runways in the Pacific in preparation for war. So why would China be prepping for war? I can't wrap my head around it. Of course you know the answer. Well, the timing of these NATO announcements was perfect, as North Korean leader Kim Jong-un traveled by armored train to Moscow, meeting with Putin, agreeing to expand their trade and military partnerships. He toured military facilities, looked at aircraft facilities. He told Putin that he will help fight against NATO's imperialism. This terrified NATO, so much so that NATO-backed Ukraine added Kim Jong-un to their kill list. Yes, a list that NATO keeps for who they'll kill next. Again, desperate people do desperate things. The Rand Corporation, a Washington think tank, wants the United States to go to war with Russia and China in the worst possible way. They just published a laughable new report on North Korea, Russia, and China's imperialist partnership, because they're invading all sorts of countries together, aren't they? Perhaps they forgot the part where the United States now has 960 military bases, dozens right on the back doorstep of China and Russia. But imperialism? Perhaps they should look in the mirror a little bit. The report outlines 3 solutions to deal with Russia and China, the Russia and China threat. The 3 solutions are all military-based. It's laughable. Number 1, they say, is to build a better outline on how we go to war. How exactly do we carry out modern war? Number 2, they say, is to build out massive new weapons and fighting capabilities to use against Russia, China, and North Korea. So weapons. And then number 3 is to build out massive new military forces. So number 1, identify how we go to war. Number 2, build out new weapons. Number 3, build out new forces. All of it leads to war. No peace talks, nothing about building our own economy back at home, helping Americans. No, none of that. Though, of course not. They're terrified of what Russia and China are doing. This week, Russia and China announced a massive new cross-border partnership. You could have heard Biden freaking out in Washington. This is a massive new logistics hub between China and Russia. It'll basically become a joint China-Russia city for oil and natural gas and minerals to be shuttled between the two countries. An amazing partnership. And new numbers out this week show Russia's economy expanding. China, Russia, the BRICS nations have agreed now to use gold as their main backing for their new international currency to settle transactions. They just decided this a few weeks ago. And of course, we knew this was coming. That's why China, Russia, India, all buying up as much gold as possible. Remember, we're told in the West that Russia's economy is collapsing thanks to sanctions. The opposite is true, however. The West's failed sanctions against these countries have only hurt Europe and the United States. This morning, Europe on pace for the euro to continue its plummet, a number of losing sessions. Bad news all across Europe as businesses are closing and layoffs continue to rise. And Bloomberg reports this morning that Russian businesses are taking billions out of the European economies and repatriating that money back into Russia, reinvesting those billions back into Russia instead of Europe. And China is supposed to be collapsing thanks to Western sanctions. So is that true? Well, this, according to new data this week, the opposite is happening. China has launched the most advanced semiconductor radar microchip in the world. How did they do that? Under sanctions, by the way. They weren't supposed to be able to do any of that. Guess they found a loophole. And China's economy saw massive growth, according to new data this week. Investors rallied, started buying a lot of Chinese stocks on this news out of China. The U.S., meanwhile, this week saw inflation numbers coming in super hot, and we could see double-digit mortgage rates very soon. Yes, I said double-digit mortgages. Better lock in those mortgages now, especially if you're planning to buy some investment real estate. The U.S. is in real trouble thanks to these Russian sanctions. Now, I spoke to economist and gold expert Peter Schiff this week, who says the Biden administration is lying to you about inflation.
When Joe Biden is out there talking about how inflation is coming down, first of all, he needs to accept some responsibility for how much it went up. So this myth that the inflation problem is over is wrong. It's just getting started.
And of course, now the only way out for them is war. That's exactly what this all points to. Tucker Carlson points out this hot war with Russia is coming, and it's going to happen in the next few months.
What are they going to do? They're going to go to war with Russia is what they're going to do. There will be a hot war between the United States and Russia in the next year. And
really?
Yes, of course. They want it anyway.
And I just want you to remember that the threat here isn't military. The threat is economic. It's the decline of the U.S. dollar. They will try to tell you that China is about to invade or that Russia is about to invade the rest of Europe. It's a lie, of course. The full-scale pullback away from the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency is at the heart of this story. They are lying when they tell you that Russia and China are ready to attack the United States. China is not building military bases in Canada or Mexico. China doesn't have a lot of precious minerals and petroleum, so they need this partnership with Russia. Russia doesn't have semiconductors and electronics, so they need those from China. It's a great symbiotic relationship that has grown by over 40% since the start of the war. And Biden created this. He brought Russia and China together, Saudi Arabia, North Korea. They're all closer thanks to the President of the United States. Now, while at the same time, the U.S. announced they are now $31 trillion in debt. $7 trillion of that is to China. So who has the upper hand right now? This is an economic war that will have people firing real weapons in a true hot war, and we need to pay attention to what's happening right before our eyes and protect our families.